Well, he disrupts it because he's an all-league player. I think the biggest thing is that as they're figuring each other out, they're not as crisp as they will be in 3 months, 4 months, but they're still awfully good. But as they're figuring it out, those guys make shots at the end to win. And, hey, Aldridge made a couple of contested shots. Kawhi Leonard made a couple of contested shots. And, they're good players. They're really good players. They're very connected as a team, and we came up short against them.
Welcome to the Garden Report. The Celtics lose to the Spurs 95-87. We're going to talk about the Spurs, and then we're going to talk about the Celtics here on the Garden Report, powered by Grandstand on CLNS Radio and Celtics Blog. Welcome to the show. I'm Jared Weiss from CLNS Radio. I'm joined as always by Jimmy Toscano of CSNNE, Tap It Up. And then once again, Kevin O'Connor from Celtics Blog reach across here.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about the Spurs in the first part as that guy drills into the parquet floor behind me. And then the second part of the show, we're going to explore the Celtics fourth quarter offensive woes, or actually their offensive performance in the fourth quarter, but whether or not they can actually win games that way. So first off, the Spurs and the Celtics, which is terrible for the first half of this game. We're talking about shooting percentages, bordering in the teens, like just ugly basketball. Pace and space at its worst, I would say. They come back second half. The Spurs are looking good. They open up a big lead, and then the Celtics fight back late in this game. But I think what really blew us away was Kawhi Leonard's performance in this game. He just has really emerged. I mean, everyone knows this at this point. He has emerged as a great, dominant, but quiet all-around force throughout the game, start to finish. Tonight we saw him play great defense, but he also hit some really important shots, especially late in this game. Kevin, we're starting with you. What happened at the beginning of this game that made it so ugly, and how did the Spurs turn it around, especially with Kawhi playing so well?
Just a lot of missed open shots to start the game. The Celtics weren't hitting open shots. Spurs weren't hitting open shots. Towards the end of the game, they started feeding Aldridge in the low post. Sullinger couldn't get the stops he had to, and Kawhi Leonard hit the big shots.
What he said. No, I'm just saying. In the fourth quarter, it was two guys. It was Aldridge and it was Leonard. I mean, Aldridge had 3 straight jump shots. When the Celtics were making their run there, they got it to within 5. Aldridge goes down the other end and hits a big shot. Then later on that quarter, the Celtics got to 4, and Leonard hits a huge three-pointer, bringing it back to 7, and the Celtics, they didn't get it back to 4, it never got closer to 4 again. Those two guys, it's just so unfair that the Spurs can have 15 years of just like dominant play, and now you look at it now, and they've got like another 10 looking at them, even with like the guys that are going out the door, like Duncan, Parker, Ginobili. Those guys are 1 or 2 years left, but they're just set for the future with Leonard and Aldridge. It's just like so unfair.
Duncan didn't even have a great night, really, by his standards.
He didn't do that much.
No, he doesn't need to anymore.
And Parker didn't.
That's why
have
they have Aldridge.
Parker didn't have to do it 10 times. I know Parker is still calling the plays for them, but Manu was the one that really stepped up. He had a huge second half, and it's amazing to see that they can really rely on Leonard and Aldridge to carry them through the game offensively, and then Parker and Duncan and Ginobili are able to kind of pick their spots of what they want to take over. And Ginobili was the guy that really did it tonight. Whether he was leading transition, he had a few really big threes. He was whipping passes that LaMarcus Aldridge couldn't even catch sometimes. They were so fast. And that's the fact that Aldridge isn't even really in sync with Ginobili yet, and he's still dominating games, getting 24 and 14. It shows just how great they can become.
Yeah, Aldridge had 18 points in the fourth quarter. Some of those, I think, came from an assist from Ginobili, who, as you said, on the second half. Second half. Well, just unreal. Ginobili. It's fun watching him play. He's so smooth. Maybe R.J. Hunter develops into a poor version of Manu Ginobili.
That'd be nice.
But it would be nice to have a guy like Ginobili coming off your bench, being able to create off the dribble, score, or assist for his teammates. Played 11 minutes in the second half. It was really a big reason why the Spurs were able to hold the lead.
Yeah, I mean, look at their bench. There's 3 guys double digits in the positive and plus and minus. I mean, Patty Mills, you talked about Parker, we were just talking, he didn't have a great game. He didn't have to have a great game. Patty Mills comes off the bench, and he's like the perfect, backup type guard that you need on that team. And these guys are just so balanced. Like, they've had even when they don't have everything figured out, it almost seems like they do have everything figured out. I mean, it's game 3. Nobody expects any team to look perfect, but I predicted the Spurs to go all the way this year, so I mean, nothing changed. Nothing's going to change their mind.
There,
I got them beating the Cavs. So.
Frankly, tonight was a mediocre night, and they were still able to really take control in the fourth quarter.
I mean, the 3 games with the guy that's going to be the centerpiece of their team. Picture that, 50 games from now. I mean, these guys are going to be clicking. If they can stay healthy, they should be clicking on all cylinders.
And speaking of clicking on all cylinders, the Celtics are not when it comes to their front court.
No.
The front court, and Stevens has this really difficult balancing act where he has to figure out which guys have to start the game, which guys have to finish the game. We were seeing tonight, once again, you had someone like Tyler Zeller play the first quarter, and then he doesn't really play again after that. David Lee had a similar thing last game. He's still trying to figure out what works. Obviously, it's matchup dependent. You're going up against 2 Hall of Fame power forwards in this game, so things are bigs, whatever you want to call them in this game. So things are a little bit different here, where length is a premium and intelligence is a premium. But Kevin, do you have any idea what could be a working strategy right now? Because I know Stevens is still trying to figure that out.
Stevens, it's funny, he doesn't give a lot to the media now, he's media savvy, but he openly admits that he'd prefer to have a big man rotation with 4 players. And I think that's pretty telling that before the game he said, well, maybe we'll make a change at some point. Maybe at one point during the year we'll go with just 4 bigs. Because I think he'd like to play his guys consistent minutes with a consistent role every night. But right now, as you alluded to, he's not able to do that. And I wonder if maybe some of the guys are pressing, especially a guy like Olynyk. He's firing his shots off, which is good. And maybe that bodes well for him going forward. But right now, the shots aren't falling. Amir Johnson's not getting looks from 3 necessarily because he's
also missing a lot of
putbacks
and layups.
Putbacks.
Yeah, a lot of bunnies.
And Sullinger's front rimming, but that's always been normal with him, and Zeller's just not playing at all. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, what kind of changes are made.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see what the starting lineup is in the next game in Indy, right? Next season.
I think it's going to be different.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, people thought there was a chance it may have been different today. I mean, 2 out of the 3 games now, Zeller has been in the starting lineup and then, disappeared. I mean, at some point, you have all these interchangeable parts. You got to start seeing what works at the start. You don't want your team to consistently go down in the first quarter, only to make a change in the third quarter and then have a run in the fourth quarter when it's too late. I mean, at some point, Stevens has to, just mess around with a couple things. And he will. I'm sure he will. He's going to look over, like he says, he's going to look over the data. And those guys will do that. And maybe they'll make some changes going forward. He likes Zeller a lot. So I'm sure it hurts him to have to bench him, for the entire, 3.5 quarters left in the game. But it'll be interesting to see where they go from there with it.
Especially it'll be interesting to see if Crowder starts to go up against.
And one other thing, it's kind of like a domino effect when you take out a guy like Zeller and you put in a guy like Celio, or take out a guy like Lee, because some of these guys, I feel like they complement each other well. So it's almost not as easy just taking out one guy and putting in another guy.
What's interesting is there's an 82-game sample from last season, including games in the preseason, where Zeller was effective in the system. But Stevens seems to be rolling with David Lee in each game, besides the last 18 minutes of Friday's game against Toronto, just to try to get him going. And so far, the results aren't there for Lee.
All right, well, before we hear from Greg Popovich on an interesting story that I'll tell you about in a sec, we got to go to our Grandstand Play of the Game. So sports highlights for fans in the stands on the new sports app Grandstand. You can share your own Celtics highlights and watch other fans' videos straight from the crowd. So download Grandstand on the App Store or go to grandstand.me. Let's take a look at this play. Boris Diaw hits a free throw, and then Amir Johnson, coming down in transition, is able to get a nice little hook shot. That was pretty much the only good offensive play that happened surrounding Amir Johnson tonight. Yes. But it was the best play that we could show you.
Amir Johnson's play of the game.
Yeah. So that is what tonight's Grandstand segment is. So let's go to Greg Popovich before the game.
Shout out to Avery Bradley's dunk.
Yeah.
Just a shout out.
Unfortunately, we didn't have that as of recording, so yeah, that would have been nice, right? But we're limited to what we get from Grandstand. But Grandstand, if you download that app,
see, that's why we need more people on Grandstand.
So go get Grandstand now.
You guys, if more people on Grandstand, the more videos we have.
That's right. It's a brand new program. It's going to be really good coming up down the road. So before we go, Greg Popovich told a really interesting story about having John Havlicek's photo as the only thing he has over his desk.
A little creepy.
It really doesn't sound interesting, I guess, when I say it, but it was interesting.
Well, you just told the story. So.
No, but there's more to it. There's more to it. So enjoy, and we'll see you for part 2 here on the Garden Report.
Well, let me just answer this. I've been coaching the Spurs team for a while now, and when you go down to the arena, coaches have a little office where you can sit and think about the game and work yourself up into a lather and think about things that confuse the issue and forget that it's just basketball. And in that room, there's a chair and there's a table. I have a lamp. And there's one picture on the wall. And it's been there for the last 18, 20 years. That's John Havlicek. So I do think about the legacy here.